A heavy bag of silver hits a rough-hewn table, the dust rising in a single shaft of afternoon light. And what we do with what we have certainly matters. But if you look closer at the precise, unusual language Jesus uses, the silver is not a financial test. It is a loyalty test. Two servants go to work. They walk into the angry marketplace. They trade. They buy. They sell. They risk their own lives carrying the name of an unpopular king. They multiply the silver, but another servant freezes. He looks at the heavy pouch. He feels the cold coins through the leather. He hears the shouting of the citizens in the streets. He decides the risk is too high. He cannot afford to lose this money. He walks away from the market. He finds a quiet piece of ground. He wraps the silver tightly in a piece of cloth. He digs his bare hands into the damp earth. He buries the king's money deep in the dirt. He wipes his hands clean. He waits. He does not steal the money. He does not spend a single copper coin on himself. He perfectly, flawlessly preserves exactly what he was given. But when the nobleman finally returns, newly crowned and expecting an accounting, this servant's safe decision provokes a terrifying reaction. In the text of Luke's Gospel, the third servant does not apologize for his lack of profit. He does not claim that the market conditions were too turbulent or that the political climate was too unstable, at the actual historical weight of the ancient coins involved. At the exact reason, the master finally erupts in anger. Instead, he offers a direct, unblinking theological defense. He says, "I was afraid of you, because you are a severe man. You take what you did not deposit, and reap what you did not sow." The Greek word he uses to describe the master is austeros. It is where we get the English word austere. But in the first century Roman world, it carried a much sharper edge. It described a dry, biting wind. It described a physical flavor that makes your mouth pucker and dry out, like chewing on an unripe olive. It meant someone who was harsh, rigid, and relentlessly exacting. This servant believes his master is a tyrant who sits in a high tower, counting copper coins, waiting for someone to make a mathematical error. And this is the quiet disease that infects so much of modern religious life. We are a species obsessed with exact religious accounting. We secretly suspect that God is an austeros master. We assume he is standing over us with a heavy ledger and a sharp pen, tracking our failures, demanding a flawless return on his cosmic investment. When you believe the master is looking for a reason to punish you, obedience becomes nothing more than an act of self-preservation. You do not love the master. You manage him. You try to keep his wrath at a safe distance by following a list of cold, mechanical rules. You start to see a reality that the stewardship reading completely misses. Jesus is not giving you an investment strategy. He is diagnosing a disease. You wrap your spiritual life in a tight cloth of rigid legalism and bury it in the dark, damp earth, just to make sure you do not accidentally lose it in the friction of actual human relationships. The buried coin is not a financial strategy. It is a theological confession. By digging a hole in the dirt, the servant is screaming his theology out loud. I believe you are cruel, and my only job is to survive your return without making a mistake. But the master does not accept this defense. He looks at the unwashed, dirt-stained cloth, and he uses the servant's own warped theology against him. If you truly believed I was a harsh man demanding a strict return, you would have at least walked this metal down to the money changers' tables to collect the minimal, passive interest. The problem was not simply that the servant was lazy. The problem was that the servant did not know who he was working for. He completely misunderstood the character of the king. Luke's gospel focuses on the political tension of a hostile city and the handful of silver minas. But Matthew's gospel records Jesus telling a nearly identical story to his inner circle just days before his crucifixion. And in Matthew's version, the numbers change. He is naming a specific, quiet terror that lives inside almost everyone who tries to follow him. Because when Jesus talks about the master who leaves, the master does not hand out 3 months' wages. He backs up an entire vault of solid gold, and he leaves the keys. Matthew chapter 25. A wealthy man prepares to travel. He calls his servants. He does not hand them small leather pouches. He hands them talents. Remember the weight. 1 talent is 75 pounds of solid metal. 1 talent is 20 years of human labor. He looks at the first servant. He gives him 5. 375 pounds of wealth, a century of human sweat. He gives the second servant 2. He gives the third servant 1. He gives no instructions. He leaves no business plan. He simply hands over a staggering, kingdom-level fortune, turns his back, and walks away. The first 2 servants run into the friction of the marketplace. They trade. They risk. They buy. They sell. They sweat in the heat of the day. They double the master's money. The third servant panics. He feels the crushing weight of the metal and the expectation. He walks into an empty field. He drops to his knees. He digs a deep hole. He buries 20 years of wages in the cold, wet dirt. He covers it up. He wipes the mud off his hands. He waits. A long time passes. The master returns. The accounts are opened. The first servant walks in. He drops 10 massive talents on the table. The heavy metal slams against the wood. The sound echoes in the room. The master smiles. He speaks. The king, who calls in debts, and the servants who have to give an account. The money is just a prop on the stage. Well done. Good and faithful servant. He looks at the staggering pile of wealth, and he calls it a little. 5 talents is 100 years of wages to a peasant. To this master, it is pocket change. He does not take the money and lock it in a vault. He promotes the man. He says, "Enter into the joy of your master." The second servant walks in. He drops 4 talents. He hears the exact same blessing. He receives the exact same joy. Then the third servant steps forward. He places 1 dirt-crusted talent on the table. He speaks the same dark, terrified theology as the servant with the mina. "I knew you to be a hard man." The master erupts. He strips the talent from the man's hands. He gives it to the one with 10. He throws the wicked servant out into the absolute dark. The judgment is violent. The reaction is severe. But if you listen to the master's voice, in the first 2 encounters, you realize the third servant completely misread the room. The master is not operating a bank. He is building an empire. And that distinction changes exactly what it means to be faithful. The dirt-crusted talent sits alone on the heavy wooden table. If you look at that scene through the lens of modern capitalism, these parables are not about how well you manage your resources. They are about how you perceive your master. The master's anger seems like the fury of an investor who lost out on potential interest. We assume the master cares deeply about the bottom line. We assume the metal itself is the point of the story, but the metal is just a tool. The master did not hand over 100 years of wages because he needed the servants to fund his retirement. He handed over his wealth because he was pulling them into the family business. In the ancient world of patrons and clients, to be entrusted with the master's estate was to be elevated from a mere laborer to a trusted partner. The first 2 servants understood this. They did not just trade the money. They took on the identity of the master in the marketplace. The third servant refused the identity. He viewed the master as an extractor, someone who only takes. He lived in the cold sweat of religious anxiety, convinced that safety could only be found in doing absolutely nothing wrong. This is the exact same fear that paralyzes the modern church. We treat our spiritual lives like fragile glass ornaments. We build tall walls of behavioral rules, hide inside our tightly controlled communities, and bury our gifts in the damp earth of safe, predictable routines. We do not want to risk looking foolish. We do not want to risk failing. The real question hiding at the bottom of these stories isn't, "Are you working hard enough for God?" It is this: we secretly believe that if we step out and the market crashes, if we try to love our neighbor and get burned, if we try to speak the truth and stumble, God will drag us into the throne room and demand his money back. But the kingdom of heaven does not operate on a deficit mindset. The talent is not a financial test you have to pass to survive. It is an invitation to learn how the master's mind works. When the first 2 servants return with a profit, The master does not take the gold and lock it in a vault. He leaves it in their hands. He expands their authority. He invites them into the joy of the master, a Greek concept that implies a feast, a celebration, a shared table. They are no longer treated as hired help. They have become partners in the regime. The wicked servant missed the feast because he was too terrified of the ledger. He thought he was being responsible. He thought he was protecting the master's property. But you cannot protect the property of a king who is willing to absorb a 60 million day loss just because a desperate man asked for more time. Because when you lay these three financial stories side by side, the unpayable debt, the silver in a hostile city, and the buried gold in the dirt, what kind of king do you think you are serving? If you think he is a hard man, a demanding tyrant harvesting where he did not plant, a single, unmistakable thread begins to glow in the dark, and it changes everything about what God is actually asking you to do. A king opens a ledger of impossible debt and wipes the parchment completely clean. A servant walks out carrying a forgiven mountain and chokes his brother over a handful of copper. A nobleman travels away from a hostile city and trusts his servants to carry his name in the dark. Two men step into the friction of the marketplace and multiply the silver they were handed. One man panics at the weight of the metal and buries his master's trust in the cold dirt. A wealthy lord returns to settle the accounts and pulls the risk-takers into his own joy. A terrified steward presents a perfectly flawless coin and misses the feast entirely because he completely misunderstood the king. Same currency, same kingdom, but here is the part I keep coming back to. It is that single, dirt-crusted talent sitting on the polished wooden table, the tragic reality of a man who did not steal, who did not rebel, who did not waste a single copper coin on himself. He lost everything simply because he believed his master was a tyrant. He spent his entire life managing a fear that did not need to exist. If you are in a season where God feels more like a divine accountant than a father, if your spiritual life has become, you will bury your life in the dirt just to keep from making a mistake. But if you understand the actual economy of the kingdom, a cold, exhausting exercise in risk management, and you are tired of burying your heart in the dirt just to keep from making a mistake, stop counting. The king does not want your flawless ledger. He wants your partnership. And may the God who absorbed the mountain of your unpayable debt free you from the quiet terror of the ledger and bring you out of the dirt and into the absolute joy of your master. He is building. It changes how you hold everything in your hands. To see the difference, a man digs his bare hands into the cold, damp dirt in the dead of night, burying a coin he is too terrified to lose. We cannot read these stories with modern bank accounts in mind. We have to step into the crushing, inescapable reality of a first-century peasant. In the Roman province of Judea, money was not a digital abstraction scrolling across a screen. It was metal, it was heavy, and it was desperately hard to get. A single silver denarius, pressed into the cracked, dirt-stained palm of a day laborer at sunset, was the exact price of survival. One coin meant your family tore into warm bread that night. No coin meant they sat in the dark and went hungry. There was no safety net. There were no fallback plans. If the winter rains arrived late, or a strange blight struck the barley harvest, or a Roman legion marched through the valley and requisitioned your livestock, you did not declare bankruptcy. You borrowed. You borrowed from the wealthy elite, from the absentee landlords in Jerusalem, from the tax farmers who watched the drought with quiet, calculating anticipation, and the terms of those loans were devastating. Debt in the ancient world was not a financial inconvenience. It was a physical tether. When a man in first-century Palestine could not pay what he owed, the creditors did not just seize his olive trees or auction his fishing nets. They took the man himself. A local magistrate would stamp a wax seal onto a piece of parchment, and guards would arrive at a home to drag a man. His wife, a servant, falls on his face against a polished marble floor, the sound of his own ragged breathing echoing in the silence of a throne room, and his children into forced labor to work off the ledger. The fear of default was the background radiation of everyday life. It dictated who you deferred to in the crowded marketplace, which streets you avoided after sundown, and how hard your chest pounded when a heavy shadow fell across your doorway. Jesus knows this. He knows the damp, rotting smell of the debtor's prison, the scrape of iron chains on stone, and the absolute panic that grips a human being when a master's patience finally runs out. He knows his audience is composed of peasants who live every single day on the razor's edge of total ruin. And he takes that exact cultural terror and uses it to shatter their theology. The setup happens in Matthew chapter 18. Peter approaches Jesus with a question that seems, on the surface, completely unrelated to economics. Peter wants to know about forgiveness. He wants to know exactly how many times he is obligated to forgive a brother who sins against him. He offers a generous number, 7 times. Peter is looking for a legal limit. He is asking for a boundary line. But instead of answering with a rabbinic ruling, Jesus bypasses the theology and transports his audience directly into the highest, wealthiest, and most terrifying courtroom imaginable. He tells a story about a king who opens the books, begging a king for more time to pay a debt so mathematically massive it would take 1,000 lifetimes to settle. The clink of metal, the heavy wooden doors of the throne room swing open. Torches cast long, flickering shadows across the polished marble floor. A king sits elevated above a completely silent room. The royal ledgers are brought forward. Thick parchment scrolls unroll. The accounting begins. Guards drag a man forward and throw him down. He is likely a high-ranking official, a regional governor who had access to the royal treasury. But right now, he is just a man out of time. The books show a massive, gaping deficit. The king gives the order. The man is to be sold. His wife is to be sold. His children are to be sold. Every single piece of property he has ever touched is to be liquidated to satisfy the crown. The servant collapses. He presses his face against the cold stone. His ragged breath echoes in the vast hall as he screams a desperate, utterly impossible promise. Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything. The king looks down at the terrified man trembling on the floor. He feels a sudden, profound pity. He gives an order that defies all economic logic. The king is not restructuring alone. He is absorbing a catastrophic loss. He releases the man. He wipes the ledger entirely clean. He lets him walk out of the throne room a free citizen, the suffocating weight completely lifted off his chest. But the story does not stop. The scratching of ledgers, the settling of accounts. Again and again. Jesus tells stories about money. You have probably heard them. The man walks out into the bright sunlight. He immediately finds a fellow servant in the street. This man owes him money. Not a kingdom-breaking fortune. 100 denarii. Roughly 3 months' wages for an agricultural laborer. The forgiven man lunges forward. He wraps his bare hands around the other man's throat. He squeezes. Pay what you owe. The second servant falls to the dust. He begs. He uses the exact same words, the exact same posture, as the man who is currently choking him. Have patience with me, and I will pay you. The forgiven man refuses. He signals the local authorities. He throws his fellow servant into a damp, lightless debtor's prison until the copper coins are produced. Word reaches the throne room. The king's compassion vanishes, replaced by a terrifying, absolute wrath. The guards are sent. The unforgiving servant is dragged back, condemned, and handed over to the jailers until he can pay back his original debt. The scene is brutal. It is fast. It is designed to shock. But the detail that changes everything, the detail that would have made the first-century peasants in the crowd gasp out loud, is not the chokehold in the street. It is the exact number Jesus uses to describe the first servant's debt. In Matthew chapter 18, verse 24, Jesus describes the initial settling of accounts. Our English Bibles usually translate the servant's debt as 10,000 talents. The parable of the talents, the parable of the minas, the parable of the unforgiving servant. They are some of the most famous. It sounds like a large sum, perhaps a few $1 million in modern terms. But to a first-century audience, that phrase was designed to cause an intellectual short circuit. The phrase Jesus speaks in the Greek text is Myrian talanton. To understand the weight of that phrase, you have to break down both words. A talent was not a coin you could slip into a leather pouch. It was a unit of weight, typically measuring around 75 pounds of solid silver or gold. A single talent was equivalent to 6,000 denarii, since a denarius was the standard wage for a single day of grueling agricultural work under the hot Mediterranean sun. One talent represented roughly 20 years of continuous, unbroken human labor. And this servant owes 10,000 of them. The word myrian, the root of our English word myriad, was the highest numerical value in the ancient Greek language. It was used to describe something literally innumerable, like sand on a seashore or stars in the night sky. If you run the math, the servant owes the equivalent of 60 million days of labor. To pay it back, he would need to work every single day for roughly 200,000 years. For historical context, most frequently preached texts in the entire New Testament. And almost universally, we assume we know exactly what they mean. The total annual tax revenue, extracted from the entire region of Galilee and Perea by the Roman Empire, was just 200 talents. This single servant somehow owes 50 times the annual gross domestic product of a nation. If realizing the sheer, a crushing scale of these ancient texts is stirring up questions you've never considered, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe. Because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the servant's promise to repay the king becomes completely ridiculous. When he presses his face to the floor and screams, "Have patience with me, and I will pay you everything." The crowd listening to Jesus would have laughed at the tragic absurdity of it. You cannot work off myrian talanton. You cannot hustle your way out of a debt that would require a mountain of silver so heavy it would shatter the scales. The number is not a literal accounting figure. It is an intentional, theological absurdity. Jesus is showing us that the king's reaction is entirely divorced from standard economics. Most people assume Jesus is giving us a divine lesson on stewardship. We read these parables as a stern warning against laziness. Matthew 18:27 says, "The Lord of that servant was moved with compassion, released him, and forgave him the debt." The Greek verb used for forgive is aphiemi. It means to send away, to let go completely, to detach. It is the same word used for a ship slipping its heavy rope moorings and drifting into the open water. The king is not restructuring alone. He is hurling the ledger into the sea. The servant walks out of the throne room, carrying a grace so massive it defies human comprehension, only to immediately forget, and the weight of the mountain, he was forgiven, and choke his brother over a handful of pocket change. The king settling accounts already points to a deeper reality about the economy of heaven, but there is another parable about a wealthy ruler, his servants, and a distribution of silver. Only this time, the master is leaving. The silver is not owed. And the final judgment reveals something entirely different. The second king does not forgive a massive debt. He hands over his own wealth and walks away. Luke, chapter 19. Jesus is walking up the steep, dusty road toward Jerusalem. The crowd around him is electric. We treat them as an ecclesiastical budget, an instruction manual for how to multiply our gifts, our time, and our resources for the kingdom. They expect a sudden, violent political revolution. They expect Roman shields to shatter and a new kingdom to materialize out of the desert air immediately. Jesus shatters their expectation with a story about a long, terrifying delay. A nobleman prepares for a journey. He is traveling to a distant country to be crowned king. The caravan is packed. The dust blows across the stone courtyard. He summons 10 servants. He hands them 10 heavy leather pouches. Inside each pouch is a mina. It is roughly 3 months' wages in silver. The metal clinks heavily as it drops into their palms. He gives one simple command: engage in business until I come. Then he turns his back. The gates open. The sound of hooves fades into the hills. But there is a violent problem. The citizens of this region hate the nobleman. They despise him completely. They send a diplomatic delegation right behind him with a blunt, defiant message. We do not want this man to reign over us. The 10 servants are left standing in the courtyard. They hold the silver in their hands. They are surrounded by a city that wants their master dead. They have to make a choice. They must trade in a hostile market. They must publicly declare their allegiance by using the absent master's money.